everyone. We're just giving it a moment just for everyone to join, and then we'll make a start just in a moment.
Hi from Ireland. Cyprus. London.
Wow, very international group.
Brussels, Nottingham, yeah, Madrid. Wow. Cool.
Okay, I think maybe more or less there. Shall we make a gentle start and then give people a few more minutes to come in? Well, first of all, we just want to say hello and thank you so much for coming today. So my name is Karen Forbes, and I'm here with my lovely colleague Linda Fisher, who we'll both be talking a little bit. We're going to do a bit of a tag team in this session, and we're really excited to be here today and to share with you some information about a series of resources that we've been developing with a team of colleagues as part of a 4-year research project, and we'll give you a little bit of a background on that at the moment. But these are resources that are freely available, and we'll give you information at the end about where you can find those as well. So before we start, we just want to see who we have in the group as well. It's a little bit strange because we can't see any of you, but we see lots of people saying hello in the chat, which is lovely. So we're going to try, if you can use the little raise hand function in the participants, and we're just going to ask you a few questions, and you can raise your hands using that if it applies. So do we have anyone in the room who is a language teacher in a secondary or high school context? Anyone working with secondary school learners or high school learners?
Lots.
Oh, lots, yeah. Coming up, yes, so lots of hands coming up.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to lower your hands there. And what about primary? Anyone working with primary or younger learners?
Yep, some. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're primary as well. Excellent. Okay, and oops, what else? What about anyone, I suppose, where people are based? Anyone based in the UK? Anywhere in the UK? Oh, quite a few. That's great. Okay, lower that one. And anywhere else outside of the UK? Oh wow, it's a really, really international audience, and it's really lovely to have you, all of you, with us today. So thank you so much. Any other questions you want to ask, Linda?
No, just to say welcome. It's fantastic to see people from all around the globe, and some people from much closer, like Ely up the road there. It's fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming on today to hear us.
Okay, so we will make a bit of a start, and hopefully, I mean, we have a very diverse audience in the room, but we hope that there's something here for everybody, and we hope that there's something that you'll all be able to take away from it. So just to give you a bit of a sense of the format, so we're going to start just by very briefly giving you a little bit of a background to the resources that are being developed and where they came from, and what the purpose of them is, and then we're going to show you some examples of the different activities and the things that have been used in languages classrooms all around the country. And we'll show you just a little bit at the end. We'll talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we found from the students who have been using these resources. So give you a bit of an insight into the findings and some of the exciting things that have come out of that. And then of course at the end we'll show you where you can find them. And all of the things that we're talking about today are freely available for you to download. So we shall make a start. Let's start. Oops, maybe sharing the screen. Okay. So as you're aware, we're going to be talking today about what we've called here identity-based activities to promote and enhance language learning. So we'll start just by giving you a little bit of background. Please do feel free to use the chat to chat amongst yourselves as we're going along. We will have some time at the end for questions, but if you do have any questions for us, we won't necessarily be looking at questions in the chat. So please use the little Q&A box at the bottom of the screen if there are any questions that you want to ask for us at the end, but please do feel free to use the chat amongst yourselves. That's not a problem. Okay, so to start off with, let's see, we just want to give you a little bit of an overview of the project. So you'll see here nice little colourful picture, and this is a bit of background of where this all came from. So it's part, as I briefly mentioned before, of a much bigger 4-year project that we've just come to the end of. And this was a project called Multilingualism, Empowering Individuals and Transforming Societies. And it was mainly based in the University of Cambridge. And overall, it was led by our colleague, Professor Wendy Ayres-Bennett. And there were lots of colleagues both in Cambridge and in other institutions as well, which you can see along the bottom. And we spanned a very wide range of different departments and areas of expertise. As you can see from our little diagram, we had colleagues who focus more on literary studies and languages, those colleagues who work in sociolinguistics, in psychology and neuroscience. And we were here in a little sort of orangey box in the middle in education. And it was led by Linda, who you'll hear more from in a moment. And we were working more on the resources that you're going to find out about today. But there are aspects from the whole project as a whole that have fed into this, and you'll see hopefully some examples of that. So just to let you know where it started from, and you'll see here the overall aim of our strand, our aspect of the project. So we were looking at the influence of what we call here multilingual identity on foreign language learning. And the focus on identity here was a really important one. So it's not just a case of having to be really proficient in different languages to call yourself multilingual. But our view is, in a sense, is that all of our students that we're working with are multilingual in different ways, and it's helping them to be able to recognize that. We were first of all interested in exploring this link between not just multilingualism, but also the extent to which students are actually willing to claim that, and to be able to say that they are multilingual, or we are multilingual, as you can see in our little logo, and they're learning in school. So partly learning in the languages classroom, but also more broadly. And then using that as a starting point, the aim was to devise a set of innovative pedagogical approaches and resources, which is what we're here to talk about today, to help learners to be able to identify themselves as multilingual, and with a view then to improving motivation and achievement in school and promoting greater engagement with language learning. So the next slide here just gives you a little bit of an overview of the general context that we were working in, which will be familiar to many of you in the room. So we were mainly working with schools across the east of England and also in London. And we worked closely with 7 schools across the course of the project. And there were a really wide range of schools to get a more representative view of schools across the country. So we had, for example, a very large linguistically diverse school in the London area, where there were lots of different languages represented in the school in different ways. But we also had schools in more rural areas of the country as well, which had a very different profile. So we wanted to make sure that the resources that we developed could work in lots of different contexts. And we worked mainly with, we worked with secondary school learners for this part of the project that we're going to talk about today. But there are applications for primary context as well, which I know will be of interest to some of you in the room. And we work both with Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 learners, but the resources that we developed and that we're talking to you about today were mainly with Key Stage 3, but with applications for Key Stage 4 as well. So we worked with lots of students, so about 2,500 in total over the course of a couple of years. And we worked really closely with their languages teachers as well. So I will pass over to Linda, who will give a little bit more of the background.
Okay, so we're going to think in this little segment about some of the findings that we got, and that is about how people identify as multilingual. So we think of 3 ways that people can be multilingual or identify as multilingual. So schools record if you like, the linguistic profile of the kids in their school, the children in their school, don't they? And they very often in this country particularly, and I'm sure in all the contexts that you're working in around the world, do it differently. But here they record English as an additional language. So that gets noted against a child who is believed at home or known at home to speak a language other than English, as well as English potentially. So schools record that data on EAL students. But then students can also identify, I suppose, themselves as EAL. They can tell us which languages they speak, and that may be the same as what the schools have got on record for them or not. So in our research, we looked at what the schools said about the students and what the students themselves gave us about the languages that they spoke. But then we also asked the students whether they identified as multilingual. So we asked them, are you multilingual? And we asked them to tell us that by putting themselves on a little sort of chart, and we'll show you that in a moment. So we got 3 different sets of data: what the schools were telling us about people with additional languages, what the students were telling us they spoke as additional languages, and then people who were identifying as multilingual. What we found was that some people identified as multilingual even if they didn't have any other languages that they spoke at home. And then there were lots of people who also didn't identify as multilingual, but yet they did speak other languages and they had lots of languages in their profile. So this was very strange to us. So we had a look to see how do these 3 categories of students map to results in terms of their learning. And what we found was that for those children that the schools identified as having an EAL, they did only better in our results on Spanish. So they came out really well on their Spanish exams. If a student told us that they had lots of other languages, they came out generally well on all of their school languages that they studied. So if they were telling us that another language at home, then they also tended to do well in their language studies at GCSE when compared to other people who weren't identified as EAL. But really, really interestingly, if a student identified as multilingual, even if they didn't have languages at home or in their profile, or if they did, they came out as having really better GCSEs across the board, apart from in history and English language. And we thought that was a really interesting finding, because what it tends to tell us is that when it comes to multilingualism, what you think you are might be more important than what others say you are, because getting children to identify as multilingual seemed to have some sort of effect with school learning as a whole. And we're not quite sure why that is. It might be something to do with that if you're prepared to embrace something to do with multilingualism, then you're somehow open to all sorts of learning. We're not quite sure, but there certainly seemed to be something to do with emotional dimension to it and so on. And certainly we found that it was almost as powerful as speaking another language at home was being able and willing to identify as someone who was multilingual. But of course, we have to find out whether helping people to identify as multilingual actually can work in our classrooms. And so we decided to do this project that you're going to hear about now, in order to see if we can help students to think about their multilingualism, to understand what multilingualism is, and therefore to allow them, if they want to identify as multilingual. We don't ever want to make students say you're multilingual if they don't want to, that's up to them. But we felt that they needed more information. What is multilingualism? Am I allowed to say I'm multilingual? All of those things were really important to us. So we put together this package of materials to try to help learners think about what it means to be multilingual and what it means to be able to claim multilingualism. So we thought about putting in for them, and you'll see we've built this in, knowledge about multilingualism. What is it? Multilingual identity awareness, and that's more about identifying. What does it mean to identify, and am I allowed to identify as multilingual? And then the idea of reflexivity, because we think it's really important that people think about all of the information they're given in relation to themselves. We've done quite a lot of work in the past where students can say, yes, languages are very important, but they don't mean anything to me, and they do not impact on my life in particular. And we needed to think about shifting that a little bit And so the resources were designed with that in mind as well. So this is our sort of theoretical, if you like, model that we developed, which you don't need to pay an awful lot of attention to, but we've written about this in various papers. And if you're interested, you can go to our websites, Karen and my websites, and you'll find some papers which show this little, if you like, theorization of how we put all these materials together. So it's about giving people knowledge, helping them to reflect on it, helping them to think about whether they want to change their own identifications, and then seeing if that can help them on their language learning journeys as they go through. So let's now have a little look at these materials themselves. And we devised the title for the whole pack of materials as We Are Multilingual, because we really want people to be able to say that, to be able to say, I'm multilingual, you are multilingual, we are multilingual. And so we devised a pack of materials, and these are the session headings. So number one is thinking about being multilingual. What does it mean? Number two, are you what you speak? So that's asking you to think about the way you speak and use language in its widest sense. Languages in the school, languages in the wider community, because we're thinking about cohesion, we're thinking about how communities use language and helping children to understand that. Thinking about the components of language in recipes for language, number 5. Thinking about culture in language, in number 6. Thinking about why we might learn languages, that's bringing in some of the other research from other strands of our project to do with cognition. How does it help your brain? Does it ward off dementia and so on? Not just about getting a good job, of course, but that also could be important. And then trying to do a whole school project about We Are Multilingual, trying to make your school a multilingual place and a multilingual space. And to help teachers deliver this, we've got PowerPoints, teachers' notes, worksheets, and so on. If you're a secondary teacher, we're presenting the secondary here. We've also got primary materials, which are devised for particularly done by primary teacher to try and fit well into about year 5 in the primary school, something quite similar to this. Our languages that we deal with here are French, German, and Spanish materials, but if you'll see when you get the materials, if you download them, they're pretty adaptable to any language. You could slot in other languages that you would be teaching as an additional language in your school. And indeed, you can basically take these PowerPoints and adapt them in any way you think you want to use them. Each session takes, well, it depends how quickly you go. Each session takes about an hour, but some teachers were taking nearly 2 hours to do each of these sessions because they generated so much fantastic discussion and the students really wanted to talk through some of these things. So we started off by getting the students to think, what does it mean to be monolingual? What does it mean to be multilingual? And then to try to place themselves on this scale from monolingual at one side to multilingual at the other. And the idea for that was really then to start that as a teaching point about considering what does it mean to be multilingual? And this is where we started then to widen their understanding of what multilingualism might be. So getting them to think, are you learning another language at school? Well, yes, you are, because you're sitting in this French class with me or this German class or whatever. Have you learned any other languages in the past? Do you have a different home language? Can you sign? Can you use computer code? Do you have a dialect? So really trying to get a widened sort of view of what it means to be multilingual and to discuss that and to try to get an understanding of it in its widest sense. So to that end, we then started to give them some sociolinguistic, if you like, understanding of where languages come from, how they relate and so on, and a sort of looking at sort of things like this lovely graphic here, trying to get them to understand why learning one language might help you to learn another language and so on. Then we've got things that are just sort of trying to get them to understand the extent of multilinguality in our schools. And for people who don't speak French, this is all about the sorts of languages that are spoken in schools in France and England and so on. So some reading text, some little, getting languages out of it and so on. Then we moved into things like other language related activities, which are about knowledge, if you like, getting them, students to think about how languages are made up of other roots and how languages actually evolve and getting them to do little activities like this where they sort of match up, and then trying to think about the different bits and pieces in our language that come from other languages. All of this is in the packs. We then started to think about things like accents and dialects. And this is something we don't tend to address at all in our classrooms, because we tend to focus in our languages classrooms on the target language that we're trying to teach. But actually trying to think about this is actually quite important, isn't it? Because thinking about accent when one speaks the target language, thinking about your own dialect, your own use of language and language variety and so on is also really important. So that was a very interesting. Some of the teachers really said that the students found that hugely interesting. And then trying to relate that to how we speak, because even trying to get people to understand that everyone has an accent, because people become very sort of, not hung up, but they become a little bit nervous about having accents, don't they? But once we understand that we've all got an accent in the languages that we speak, that's actually quite empowering for students. And so they really enjoyed thinking about that and thinking about their accent when they speak a foreign language and what that means and what it means in terms of their identity also. Very interesting discussions about that were held in the classrooms. And then getting them to reflect on this in relation to themselves was also very important for us. So getting them to think about what they used to think, what they now think, and what this means for their learning of the foreign language, just to try to make them shift something about their thinking and their behaviors. And also very important, what will you tell other people about what you learned today? Because we feel that going back out into their communities of friends, into the community of family and so on is very useful. And in fact, we did ask them several times to go and share some of that and come back and report the sorts of conversations that they had. And that worked really very, very well, with people going and saying that they had a lovely conversation with their grandmother about language that they might never have had. And some of those were very sweet tales that they came back with. Some other activities that we got them to do were things like drawing a multilingual timeline. So we introduced them to people who have got multilingual backgrounds and showed them how that might map onto a timeline. And so we can see an example of Rita Ora. She's a pop singer for people who don't know. I'm not big up on Rita Ora myself, but the kids knew about her. And we showed them her multilingual timeline and how each of our languages happened at different points. And then we encouraged our learners to do their own multilingual timelines. And for people who didn't speak many other languages at home, we asked them to bring in all these aspects of multilingualism, the dialects, the other things that they can do around their languaging, like slang, emoji, sign language, body language, etc. And just trying to think more widely about language, if you like, through the multilingual timeline. And then thinking about benefits of multilingualism for society, for example. These are just examples we're throwing up here. The sessions themselves are sort of have got a logic to them. What I'm showing you now doesn't necessarily, but we wanted them to think about benefits of multilingualism for the brain, for society, and for me. And that was leading into that session about why learn languages, for example. And that's the example there I was using about then go and tell someone outside the classroom about the advantages of multilingualism. Go and discuss it with your family, with your sisters, with your friends, and see what they think about it and bring it back. So asking people, are you surprised by these things? Are you surprised when I tell you that multilingualism could be good for you and good for your brain, as well as potentially helping society, for example, in terms of social cohesion and whatnot? Okay, and then finally, thinking about how multilingualism might impact their futures, and this idea of an ideal self in the future. Can you think about where you might be living, the sort of job you might have, the people you'll be working with, the hobbies and so on, and basically thinking this through in relation to the work that we've done and how you might see yourself being multilingual in the future. So all of this pack of materials was essentially put together in order that teachers could open up a dialogue in their classrooms and see how the students responded to it. And so there are two ways, obviously, that we can analyse that. We can analyse it by talking to the teachers and trying to get some feedback from the students, and we did that, and we got generally very, very strong feedback from the teachers. We've got some videos of teachers talking about it, which we could also share links to. If anyone was interested, just contact us. And we've also then, we've got all of that from that side, but we've also then got the research side. So we also then wanted to see and measure, if you like, the effects of such an intervention. And that's what Karen is now going to tell us about by thinking about, that sounds great, but does it work? So over to you, Karen.
Thanks, Linda. So yes, I'm just going to talk very briefly, just for the last couple of minutes, just to give you a bit of an insight into what we did find here in terms of using these materials in the classroom. So coming back to this question that we started with about whether this sort of identity-oriented pedagogy can help students to develop this sort of multilingual identity that we mentioned, and what other effects that might have. So what we're going to talk about here is some of the data that we collected from the 4 schools that we worked with really closely, actually, in developing these resources. So we worked with languages teachers and their students, and initially this was year 9 students, so 13, 14-year-olds. And we worked with them over the course of an academic year, and we got some data at different points of the year. So I'm just going to give a very broad summary of some of the things that we found from one of our questionnaires, actually, because we've nice clear sort of before and after. So I'm just drawing here on 2 of the groups that we had. So the intervention group, these are the students who actually did the activities that Linda was talking about. Some of them were studying French, some German, some Spanish. So a whole range. As we said, we have the resources in each of those 3 languages. Some of that is in English, but they also have activities in those languages as well. And in the control group, just a class who are carrying on with their normal lessons without having this. So the first thing, as you saw before in the resources, we had given this little line, so monolingual to multilingual, and asked them to indicate with a little cross where they felt that they were. And just sort of by measuring that and taking the average of what they put, you can see here that the orangey colour is before and the blue colour is afterwards. And you can see from our intervention group students that there was quite a big increase there. So it was over 11 points of increase there, which meant that they were much more likely at the end to actually identify themselves as multilingual, which was really, really encouraging, I suppose, for us. And then the next aspect which we looked at was language beliefs. So for this, we gave them a whole series of different statements. Here are just some examples. So learning other languages is important. Learning other languages is useful, even if everyone speaks English. And it's cool to be able to speak other languages. There's some other statements as well. So we took those together and we asked them to indicate whether they agree or disagree, for example, with these statements. And you can see here, it doesn't look like much of an improvement looking at that chart, but actually was, a significant improvement we found with this intervention group, that by the end of this, they were more likely to think that languages were important. But we also thought it was important to look at their self-beliefs in relation to languages as well. So not just what they thought about languages in general, but what they thought about themselves as language learners. So we asked them some things like, for example, I always do my best in language lessons. I think learning other languages is easy. I think I have a talent for learning other languages. And, we saw a change here as well. So by the end, it seemed like those students who did the resources and activities were more likely to be more confident in themselves as language learners, which again was really a nice finding for us, really positive. And we wanted to get an insight as well into some of their emotions around languages. So as Linda said at the near the start, this emotive aspect is quite important. So one way of getting in that was asking them simply, about their enjoyment of language learning. Did they enjoy languages? Again, we saw an improvement with the intervention group students who were really positive actually about the resources and the activities. And another way of trying to get at this was to ask them about pride. So not just did they enjoy languages, but actually did they feel proud to speak the different languages that they know? And this was an interesting one to collect, because we didn't want to impose languages on them and say, well, you're studying these languages, so tell us whether you're proud to speak them. But we left it open for the students to actually indicate to us any languages that they knew. And some only put one, just maybe put English and that was it, even though we knew they were studying other languages. But similarly, some put up to 8 languages. We had students, for example, who put Japanese because they liked anime and associate it with languages in different ways. And they were really proud of having that as part of their repertoire. And we saw quite a big, actually really big increase here in terms of their feelings of pride in being language learners and in having different languages in the repertoire and in their everyday lives. So that was really positive as well. And just to finish off with, we have a few quotes from some of the teachers who we worked with as part of the project. So these are the teachers who we worked with throughout the year. They were doing a lot of the intervention activities with their classes. They were giving us feedback throughout the year. So we were really taking that on board. And this is just a small selection. You'll see a few more on the website. But first one, it was a really great project. It led to really interesting discussion. And I think there was just having the space to actually have some of these discussions and the prompts to lead them through it. And the second one there in the middle points out it was really good to make the children understand that their bilingual status was valid. And I think this gets particularly at EAL students, so those who do have a language other than English that they speak at home, and actually bringing that into the classroom and that becoming something that was really valued and part of their multilingual repertoire. But similarly, the final quote says, even for learners who are just learning a language, or they might be at quite early stages of learning a language, this teacher said it improved the children's understanding that learning a language was a process. And just because they weren't hugely successful Spanish speakers at that particular moment in time, didn't mean they weren't legitimate in their attempts to speak Spanish. So this idea that even for those students who English might be their main language, they might not feel like they have any particular authority to claim multilingualism at the beginning, because they might feel like they're not very confident or proficient in that language. But even for those students, it did help them to be able to reflect on that way and to be able to claim that sort of multilingual identity. So just as a brief summary of some of the things that we found. So we found that these resources did have a positive effect on students' willingness to identify themselves as multilingual. And there was also evidence to suggest this link between the increase in multilingual identity as a result of the activities, and also more positive views in general about the value of languages, higher reported enjoyment of language learning, increase in self-efficacy in relation to language learning. So that was really, really positive. And there are lots of different ways that this is, we're continuing to get feedback both from teachers and students on this. So hopefully that will be of interest to lots of you in different contexts. And we just want to point out as well the members of the team. So we're here just representing members of a much wider team who are involved in developing the resources, along with our wonderful colleagues in schools as well, who have been involved throughout the process. And the important bit is where do you find these resources? So we have the information here about where you can find them. So we have a website which is wamcam, wamcam.org, which is a We Are Multilingual website. And on that website, you'll find lots more information based on what we've talked about today. And also there's a sign up tab at the top, and that's where you can go and put in your email address and you'll be sent a link to the resources. So we have 3 different versions of this. We have resources that are ready to go now. So if you want to go in right now, you can sign up for the secondary languages resources, and you'll get the link to that pinged more or less right away into your email account. And these are targeted at, based on some of the examples that you've seen, these are targeted at secondary languages teachers. And we have versions at the moment in French, German, and Spanish, because we wanted to put some target language exercises in there as well. Some of the discussion and activities, as you've seen, are more based in English, but we do have target language exercises in there too. And as Linda said at the start, they're very adaptable. So if you teach, for example, Italian or a different language, you could take those and, swap out the bits that you need into your lessons. And we also have, coming very, very soon, resources for primary teachers. So we have a pack that we had a primary language specialist who helped in adapting these resources and activities to the primary classroom. So if you put your details in there, you'll get a little link to another sign up page. So just pop in your email address and we should have those hopefully in the next couple of days. So sometime in the next week, you should get a little link for the primary resources, and then you'll get all of the packs there. So they're sort of shorter activities that can be used in primary classrooms. They were targeted maybe for the sort of final year or two of primary, so sort of year 5-ish. And then we also will have a version, again, coming soon. There's a space there on the website to sign up, and that will be with you quite soon, of what we call whole school resources. So these were designed very much, we sort of stripped out any of the target language specific content and repackaged it a bit to be appropriate for things like assemblies or PSHCE lessons or form time, things like that, where you maybe want to focus on multilingualism to bring those wider discussions into the school. So those resources are in the whole school bit. So for any of those, you'll go onto the website. We also have Twitter and an email account there, which you're very welcome to get in touch with us. And on the website, you'll see at the top right, I think, a little tab for signing up. And that's where you have the options of putting in your email address and you'll be sent the links to these. So we have a couple of minutes left. Linda, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we go on?
No, I think that's fine, Karen. No, that's all good. And maybe just take a couple of questions now. People have popped a couple into the question and answer. So I'll just take one of the first ones. Does it include post-16 learners? Thank you, Helen, for the question. At the moment, the resources are targeted more lower down the school. I think there's definitely all learners of languages, well, in fact, all learners altogether really could use these resources, could do with these resources, couldn't they? So I think if you went on there, even if you're teaching older people, you could easily adapt them. Some of the discussion points and so on, and some of the ideas around this are suitable for any age group, I would say. So yeah, please do have a look, because I think you would find that actually quite helpful.
Mm-hmm. Should I take another question we have here from Vivian? Did you also include the pupils' parents? It would seem that parents are generally excluded in children's education. That's a really, really good question, actually. And we have tried to build in links here. So some of the activities that you've seen actually really explicitly encourage students to go and talk to parents and talk to other members of their family and indeed people in the wider community. So we do include parents and families, but through the students themselves. So we're really encouraging them to go and start these conversations. And the resources give them, in a sense, the resources and the starting point to be able to do that, and very specific tasks that could be framed as homework tasks, as we have done in some of the resources, to encourage them to go and to start those conversations and then to bring those back into the classroom and feed them in. So it is very much designed as a, it's an intervention, a set of resources that's based in the languages classroom, but we hope that it has a much wider reach really than that.
Okay, we've got another question then. Would you like to introduce Arabic? Yes, absolutely. We'd like to introduce all sorts of languages. It's simply about taking some of the activities and putting them into these source languages. So if you wanted to create a few slides based on what we've got, Saleh, we would love to have them. It's obviously we've got resource as well, trying to get them translated and so forth. But yeah, absolutely, any languages we'd be really happy to expand the repertoire of what we've got. I think it would be fantastic to have them in Arabic as well.
Mm-hmm. And we have a question here from Elena about the resources for primary school. Will they be adaptable for online teaching? So yes, I think the answer to that is very much yes. They're similar to the secondary resources in format, in the sense that they consist of PowerPoints with sort of teacher notes and things like that as well. So yes, certainly, and the primary activities tend to be maybe shorter little bits of sessions rather than a lot longer. So yeah, absolutely. I think it could be, all of them really could be adapted for online teaching.
Mm-hmm. And so lots of people are asking about things like adaptable for Celtic languages or adapted for 3 to 5-year-olds. We think, yes, absolutely. I think any languages these are suitable for. I think for Celtic languages, other home languages, I think it'd be marvelous to have them adapted for those. And so please, teachers, take them, adapt them, drop them back to us if you ever get some slides that you want us to build in. I mean, these are open source for you to work with. I mean, obviously, I think it would be nice if you could accredit them whenever you use them, because often we've used images as well and resources that we need crediting through our website. So again, try to not go crazy by taking the stuff and using it yourself, but please do. I think it would be fantastic to have this. And for the little ones as well, 3 to 5-year-olds, I think Viviane, if you can adapt them to make them suitable for that age group. Again, we don't have the expertise in that age group, but if you can do that, I think it would be a fantastic thing. So please keep in touch with us with anything that you're doing in this regard, because it would be great to hear from you and to know how you're using them and what you've done with them. That's our aim. Our aim is to get it out there and to get everyone in the world to say we're multilingual, to not have any proficiency barriers, not to have people worried about saying it because it means, oh, I'm expected to speak things all fluently and so on. We want everyone to be openly able to say that they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even the other materials in the secondary resources are those that have specific reference to target language. I mean, we found even with the small number of schools that we worked with directly that also needed to be adapted. So if you have a very high performing class, you might need to stretch that a little bit, or some of the activities that we maybe have or questions that we have in English could be done in the target language. But for some classes that might struggle with that, it might be a case of having to adapt the level. So yeah, as Linda said, they're very, very adaptable resources. So please do take them and use them in your context, adapt them and let us know how it goes.
Have we got time for one more question? I think we've got another question. Are you thinking of creating slides for teachers of English as a foreign language? Yeah, Sarah, thank you for the question. And I think there is, as you'll see, a lot of the slides are actually in English because, again, it's very difficult to know what level people are working at in their languages. So actually, a lot of the slides, it would be very easy to adapt for teachers of English as a foreign language, as you'll see. So simply, it's a matter of translating some of those things back into English. So if you take the French pack, translate some of it back into English. If you take the German pack in the same way, I think it would definitely be adaptable.
And actually, the whole school materials pack, which will be coming very soon, is all in English, because that's actually designed targeted to be used not necessarily by language teachers or language specialists, but something that could be used by any teachers in the school who are maybe form tutors or want to do assemblies. So they're actually all exclusively in English.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the end of our questions. So all it remains is to say thank you so much for coming on this afternoon and being engaged and posing your questions. And please do go to the site, have a look at the materials, and please do get in touch with us. Our email addresses, you'll find if you do a quick search for us online, you'll find our email addresses. And so please get in touch and let us know how you get on with them, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you so much.